Today's episode is all about something that'll help you meet your business goals and get paid along the way to reaching them. I'm talking about creating and selling your business experiments. Welcome to the Soulful Sales Show, where we talk about believing in the value of your offers, getting them in front of your right people, and selling more of what you do in your unique way. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Sales Show. So today I have a guest. I'm chatting with Ruth Ridgeway about creating and selling your business experiments and generally just being human, being yourself, and following your creativity in business. Ruth is a serial business experimenter and rule breaker who focuses on showing people how to create more freedom, fun, and passive income in their life and online business. Ruth and I have known each other online for a while. She was a huge part of my Soulful Sales Summit this year, with so many attendees taking action on her presentation literally during the summit week. So I am very excited to bring that summit topic here to the podcast as well. So in this interview, we are going to cover what business experiments are, how they help you to meet your own goals. We're going to talk about some of the practical elements of how to run and sell your business experiments, plus what to do when life inevitably gets in the way of you running them and meeting your goals. So enjoy. So hi, Ruth, and welcome to the podcast. I am very excited to have you on because you were a part of my Soulful Sales Summit. And I would say that your presentation was like the hit of the summit. Like everyone was talking about it and inspired and getting so many ideas from it. So I'm so happy that we can share some of the stuff we talked about and potentially other things too, about your topic so that all the listeners can benefit. So let me start by asking you, your presentation was about creating and selling your business experiments. So would you be able to explain in a nutshell for the listeners, what does that mean? What are business experiments?
Yeah, I can. And do you know what? Being part of your summit, the thing that I really, really liked was that I think my presentation went out on day one. And even by the end of the summit, people have been like, I've got an idea. I've already launched my experiment. They like got them out there into the world. So I loved they'd started selling them and earning from them straight away. So I love seeing that. But yeah, basically to me, a business experiment is where you take one of your business goals. So say, for example, you might want to write a book. You might want to grow your membership community to 100 people. You might want to get your first 1,000 people on your email list. You take a goal that you have in your business and you turn it into a fun business experiment. So for me, if you set a goal, you can just do that. And obviously you can do it privately, you can do it on your own, you can try and work towards achieving that goal. But when you turn it into a fun business experiment, you're basically opening the doors and inviting people to follow along behind the scenes as you try and achieve your goal. So you're saying to people, like, I'm gonna, try and get my first launch a new membership and get my first 100 members. I haven't done it yet, but if you want to follow along behind the scenes to see how I do, all the ideas and strategies I implement, I'm going to share the behind the scenes of it. So here's where you can follow along. And that's when you can sell it and get paid for it as you work towards achieving your goal. So you can do it privately, completely, but if you open it up as an experiment, you can get paid for it, which I quite like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So can you share a bit more about the business experiments that you've run? I mean, I'm guessing there are some experiments that you would just, some goals that you would just keep private and behind the scenes, but some of them have felt right for you to put out there publicly in this way. How have you been using this in your business?
Yeah, I would say like behind the scenes in general, I have just shared in multiple different ways for years and years, like 10-ish years since I've been an online business. They've been the things I've shared the most and that have always gone down well, most of my community, whether it's a monthly behind the scenes, whether it's regular income reports, whether it's, I tried this thing, here's what happened, like a launch debrief. I love sharing them anyway. And it was just earlier on this year, I set myself like a bit of a bigger, chunkier goal where I'm like, oh, I want to make 100K of just passive income. So like, rather than looking at my client work that I do and including that income, I want more quote unquote passive income in my business or leverageable income. And I want to reach the 6-figure mark just in that. And again, I was just going to do it on my own. But I'm like, hang on a moment. Again, I love sharing the behind the scenes. Why don't I open the doors to it? So as I'm doing it and as I'm testing out new ideas, new strategies, setting up different things, if I share with people the behind the scenes of that, I can get paid for it and it will help towards my 100K passive income goal because I'm sharing the behind the scenes. So yeah, I just literally off the cuff, I think I had the idea 3 or 4 days later, I put the quickest checkout together in the world, did a Facebook post. I copied, pasted the Facebook post into an email, sent that out. And I can't remember how many people I had signed up straight away. I had a good amount of people, I think maybe in the first couple of weeks. Was it 100 people? I can't remember, but like a good amount of people. And as soon as people saw what it was, they were like, love this. Because, well, one, people just love seeing behind the scenes, period, full stop. But secondly, there's a lot of people who want to have more quote unquote passive income in their life and business. So they're like, oh, if Ruth does this thing, I can kind of steal and borrow some of our ideas, some strategies. So it's just gone down really, really well. Yeah, since launching it.
How long has it been since you launched it?
7 months now.
7 months. Wow. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about some of the things to do with running that in a bit. And I will make sure I link to the 100K experiment in case anyone wants to check it out. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because firstly, I just love an inspired idea. You know, when you get an inspired idea and you put
Mm,
it together and you launch it. And I know that you're all about following your creativity and fun and flow. And that is just the perfect example of it. I love that. It's helping towards your goal by selling it and making the money
the
from it.
meta, yeah.
Yeah. It's helping you to, I'm guessing, stay accountable and to make
Mhm.
sure that you prioritize it. And it's helping your followers and the buyers because they get to see how you're doing it. And I know there is a difference, isn't there, between taking a course that teaches you how to do something and observing how other people are trying things. I definitely learn, I mean, from both types.
Yeah.
I love watching people in action, and I find that
Mhm.
really inspiring in a different way from just taking a course sometimes.
I think like we've spoken about this before, like both are valid, both are really useful in their different kind of ways. And I don't know, for me, an experiment is just it feels a little bit more fun because I don't know, it just does. It's got, who knows where it's going to go. It's not like this 6 step module thing and 52 video lessons. It's just like it's going to go where it's going to go. So there's the anticipation of that. But also there's typically a more human element to it as well, because it's not tried and tested. I haven't done this thing, so follow my blueprint. I don't have a blueprint for you yet. I'm making this up as I go along. I'm trying different things. Some will do really well, some won't, some will do in the middle. Um, and so along the way, I'm going to have all the feels, the emotions. I'm going to have bits where I'm like, this went amazing, and I'll share that. And I'm also going to have wobbles and doubts and all the other, feelings with it. So sharing that, I think it just adds that human element. So other people, if they're looking to do a thing, achieve a goal, it's just like, oh, Ruth felt really nervous there. So I'm not the weirdo, just, having doubts. And can I really do this? Like somebody else is showing their vulnerability too, in terms of, again, that human element. Like Ruth doubts herself, or, oh, that thing really, really well. So it's a bit more nuanced and all encompassing from that perspective for me, like an experiment over a course.
Yeah, yeah. I love it for that reason. I think also in the age of AI, that human element is
Mm,
just, it cannot be AI'd. It just
yeah.
can't. Like
No,
and it helps people to
you can't,
connect with you, the
yeah.
person, the individual.
Yeah, you cannot AI your feelings.
Yeah. So I am going to talk more about the feelings that come up as a result of doing something like this. But first, let's talk about some of the practical side. Like what makes for a good business experiment to create and sell?
So, in my eyes, I have done this myself and I've seen other people do it, where I will share a general behind the scenes. It might be follow along my business once a month. I'll share behind the scenes of what's going on. And I've typically done those as blog posts. And I've seen people try to turn those into like a behind the scenes experiment thing, like follow along my business. And from what I've seen, typically they don't do quite as well because what's the reason for following along? There's so many businesses out there. What am I really going to get from it? So you might get stuff, but it's just like, what's really the thing? Whereas if you take a specific goal, for example, oh, I want to launch a membership and, welcome my first 100 people, or I'm brand new to business. I've only got my first 62 subscribers so far, but I really want to reach my first 1,000 subscribers. There are so many other people who want to launch a membership and have their first 100 members. There are so many people who are new to business and want to get their first subscribers. There are so many people who want to get on more podcasts. And if your challenge that you've set yourself is to pitch yourself to 100 podcast episodes and see what happens, like what works, what doesn't, there are so many other people who want to be more visible, be on more podcasts, and they want to know what works. So when you set a specific goal, it's going to resonate with other people who have that specific or similar goal as well. We're like, I want to be on more podcast episodes. I want to launch a membership and actually get it off the ground. I want to grow my email community. So when you can follow along, you can pick out the bits where like, say mine, there's going to be things that work and things that don't. So when somebody can follow along, they can be like, oh, Ruth tried this, this, and this. Actually, it didn't work that well. I might skip over those things, but I saw that and that worked really well for her. If I'm going to do my own experiment, I'll borrow those ideas and try them myself. So it kind of like fast tracks that system. So for me, you can share a general, which is okay. Like people will sign up. But if you make a specific goal, the people who have a similar goal are instantly going to want that thing because they want to achieve that as well. And it gives them a bit of a fast track system.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking from my experience, I actually had my own behind the scenes business experiment running before the summit where I saw your presentation and heard you talk about it. I already had it running. And it was a specific goal, but it was a very, very big, this is like the kind of goal that might happen in years type of goal. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not pushing it to happen this year. It's just like a vision I have for my business, which is basically to like work with 1,000 people in my memberships, which is a wild goal. And like I said, not anything I anticipated being a reality anytime soon. And I realized it was just way too broad. It was too big for for me, really. I never actually tried at that time selling it as a standalone thing. It was just a bonus for my members. But had I tried selling it as a standalone thing, I don't know how that would have gone because I couldn't say to them how long I would be running it, how long it would take, like
Yeah.
what I was really vague with it. I was really vague with how I updated it, what the updates were. I just basically had a what's it called, Telegram, like voice note thing, and I would just come in and share a voice note whenever I had a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up not working for me. And then more recently, I shifted it to a 200 new member goal experiment. And I'll ask you a bit more about some of the
Mm-hmm.
factors around delivering the experiment. But basically, because I had talked to you about this before, I
Yeah.
had way more boundaries around it. I had a very specific goal, still a very big goal, like I'm not going to lie, and it's just working so much better. It's so much more doable for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
did sell it as a standalone thing as well as being a bonus for my members. And it just feels all around so much more contained, so much more of its own thing. There's other things I can do within, like, if I finish this one, I succeed, there's another one I can do.
You
It's
can do
kind of
another
like a
one.
sub, it's
Yeah.
kind of like a subtopic of the original massive vague one. Um, and it feels really, really good to me, like to have narrowed it down. And I think there are times when I'm like, wow, this is such a specific goal. Like it feels a little bit scary sometimes, but generally it has motivated me a million times more than that
Yeah.
original big vague one.
And I think, like you said, like one, I'm obsessed with putting containers around things, and I will break that rule sometimes. But if I can put a container around something, it benefits me and it benefits the people taking part. But just using your example, we're like, oh, 200 new members. I've no idea how long it's going to take you or how long you think it'll take you. But just as an example, let's say you think to yourself, like, with all the different ideas and strategies you've got, 200 new members, I hope it will take me 6-ish months. So let's say that, for example. It could be that's your experiment. I've got this 6 months experiment. Can I welcome 200 new members? And let's just say you do, you get 204, and you're like, woohoo, achieve the experiment. You might then do another one because your bigger goal is 1,000 people. You could then also sell another experiment where like, I want to work on another 200 people, but can I collapse the timeline of that? So instead of 6 months, could I do it in like 3 to 4 months? So you can just break down that bigger goal and sell it as smaller bite-sized ones in different kind of ways. So yeah.
I love that. And so far, we've used a few examples of maybe a longer term one, but this works with short term stuff too, right? Like a 30-day challenge, potentially even a week
Totally.
thing.
Yeah. But you can do like like when I was coming up with different examples to share, like in my course and in the summit, for example, it could just be that you want to launch like this new bite-sized digital product or course, like a tiny little offer that's going to be like, $10, $20 or whatever it's going to be. So it could be you take people behind the scenes that you're going to create, launch, and sell a tiny course within 10 days. Like that's totally possible and doable. And for people signing up, like the typical thing is, if you sign up to learn how to create and sell courses, they're bigger, chunkier type courses, and that's fine. But sometimes you've just got this little teeny tiny idea, and if you can get it out there within 10 days, that feels fun and easy and simple. So somebody can follow your experiment and see, like, I just want to, like, if I can get a new thing out there in 10 days and start getting paid for it in this idea, it's not just taking me weeks or months, like, I'm going to sign up for that 10-day experiment. So yeah, you can totally do like much, much shorter ones as well. And I think if you've never done one before, like a 10-day, a 21-day, maybe a 30-day is like a perfect way to start.
Yeah. So anyone listening, just have a think about what your goals are, what would be fun, and we'll talk a little bit more about the details. But yeah, you get to set the
Mm.
times and parameters. And let's just also talk about what is, because this was a question someone had in the summit. How do I know whether it's a behind the scenes experiment versus a course that I should be
Ah,
selling?
I love this question. Um, yeah, and the person who asked was just like, oh, they're sharing the behind the scenes of their experiment, the different ideas and strategies, but like, what information is too much? Like, is it then going to be a course where I'm teaching all of these things and ideas that I'm implementing? And for me, the difference with sharing the behind the scenes of your experiment as you're doing it is you're sharing your ideas and your strategies. Whereas the how to would be something I would turn into a course. So let's say, for example, I set myself a challenge to record hang on, let me think of an example. I'm a web designer and I've decided I want to be more visible. I want to really get on YouTube. So I'm going to share these bite-sized 2 to 5 minute tutorials on how to design different things on your website. So I'm going to record these videos, put them on YouTube, see how they do. Can I be more visible, bring more people in? That's my challenge. 30 days, 30 YouTube tutorials. Um, I, as I'm doing it, I'm sharing my ideas. Oh, I'm going to do 30 videos. They're going to be 2 to 5 minutes. I'm going to do these different types of topics. I'm going to see which ones work best, which ones don't, see which ones get the most views. I'll share all the numbers, the stats, all of the things. But there's going to be more that goes into it in terms of um, like, oh, how to create really cool titles for your YouTube videos, how to create really cool graphics and thumbnails, maybe how to edit your video really quickly. Those to me don't need to go in your experiment. You're letting people know, like, oh, I've tried like little tips along the way. But if you're like, oh, how to create really cool thumbnail graphics, that's a separate course. That's a how to. So as you then sell your experiment, you could later on loop back and be like, oh, I'll create this other bite-sized course on how to come up with really cool titles. I'll come up with another course that's how to create really cool thumbnail graphics or how to edit your YouTube video within 30 minutes. The how to is where I would sell it as a course rather than an experiment. So that's how I differentiate the two. An experiment is my ideas and my strategies. Any how to I would say for a separate course later on if I wanted to.
It's so clear when you think of it that way. And what I found with my experiment is, like you said, sometimes you get ideas for new courses or trainings you can create, and sometimes it's just the perfect way to link out to stuff you've already created,
Yeah.
which I always encourage my clients to really get in the habit of. If you're talking about something and there's something related that you sell, just mention it, get in the habit of mentioning it. And that comes up all the time. So I was talking about doing a webinar, for example, in my behind the scenes experiment. I'm not teaching people the ins and outs of how I did it. I'm
Mm-mm.
sharing them I'm sharing with them what I did. Like I set it up. Here's the landing page if you want to look at it. And by the way, if you want my whole process on how to do webinars, then I have a course about that, and I link to the course.
Yeah.
So it's a really great way to weave in other stuff that you sell in a very natural way. It's not like in your face salesy whatsoever. It's helpful for the people that need it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really clear distinction that you've given there. Really clear.
And I also want to add, because obviously, like, say if you don't have the course, but you could later on create it if you want to. If you've already got it, yes, link to it. But because I also love affiliating for things, it might
Yeah.
be that you don't have a course, but you know a tech software, or you took a course on how to create those like webinars or those YouTube graphics. So link to those things with your affiliate links, and that naturally brings in more affiliate income into your business. So yeah.
This is actually something I've been doing. I'm really glad you mentioned affiliate links. So in the way I've set up my how I deliver it every week is I've deliberately put a section at the end, resources mentioned.
Yeah.
I think that you do this as
Yeah.
well. And I will link to, okay, lead pages. That's where I set up my webinar landing page. Or I've linked to and I should mention this in this podcast episode, that Ruth has a whole course about what is the full name of the course?
Do you know what? I'm never creative with my titles. It's literally called Sell Your Business Experiments.
Sell your business.
It does
It
what it
does what
says
it
on the
says. Yeah.
tin.
So Ruth has a course about it, and I have linked to that in my own
Exactly.
experiment. When I've explained, like probably in the intro lessons, like why I'm doing it and all of this, I use my affiliate link and link to it to your
Hmm.
course. So yeah, really, it's a great way to get in the habit of doing it. It's helpful for everyone, beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, like it's just a useful thing. Like if somebody wants to know the tech software, like rather than it's just useful. It's just a useful
Yeah.
thing to do.
And mindset wise, it's totally okay not to give everyone everything in every single offer. It's very, very
Yeah.
important to have those boundaries. Like I'm sharing what I did, but if you want to know how to do it, here's my other offer about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I would love to talk a little bit about the process. So I think that a lot of the time these things can start off really fun. That's certainly how I felt when I did my initial version of my
Mm.
experiment, and it felt really good. But because I didn't have a proper process, because I didn't have a specific way of delivering my behind the scenes, it sort of fell apart after a while. So what in I guess in a nutshell, like what's the process you have? And I know that this will vary, like everyone can choose their own process, but how do you suggest that people set it up so they know exactly what the deliverables are, like how they're sharing them behind the scenes, and also for you to keep track of everything you're doing behind the scenes?
Templates, templates, templates. Love a template. So for me, I will choose in advance. I'll decide when I'm sharing the behind the scenes. Is it like every day, once a week, once a month? So I'll decide like when I'm going to share the behind the scenes for my experiment. And it depends what it is, how long it is for when you share. But then I'll also choose whether it's daily, weekly, whatever, what am I going to share each time in my behind the scenes? So typically, like for mine, for example, the first thing I share is like what I plan on doing this week, what I actually did do this week, the stats and the numbers. I will share resources. And there's one other thing that I've completely forgotten right now, but like I'll have a list of 5 things that I share, and I just know these are the things I'm sharing. And as I go about my day, my week, I will just bullet point like what I've done. So like I don't have to keep it in my head at all. Like it's just literally like a bullet point, like, oh, I shared this a link to so and so. I added this PS in my email. Whatever the thing is, I'll just bullet point it so that then when I come down to like create or write my behind the scenes, I've just got all those bullet points. I just need to then basically transfer them over into that template. I'll typically add a few screenshots if it makes sense to do so, or a little bit of extra context, but I've got it ready to go because I've got my list of bullet points. Other people could do it differently. Like you could do an audio private podcast if you want to, if you're behind the scenes. But for me, I just bullet point as I go. And then I've got a template. I just know that I'm going to be sharing A, B, C, X, Y, Z, and I can just transfer it over really easily. So I don't forget anything.
And it sounds small, but when you shared, when we did a Q&A in the
Mm.
summit about bullet points, I was like, I have permission to write this in bullet points. That
Yeah.
makes it so much easier than thinking about, I got to write out all the, in the proper paragraphs and the whole
Yeah.
thing. It's so much easier. And I now have my own template, which is very much inspired by you. And it's just so much easier. Fill in the blanks. And I have my own
Yeah.
little like box in my Notion notes where I have a little table where it's like members added this week and total number of members, and I update it every week, and it's just so much easier. So much easier.
Yeah. Like if you said like stare at a blank screen and write some stuff, I'd just be like, mm. Whereas if it's just I've got this template and it's just literally filling the blanks with bullet points, it doesn't have to really be this cohesive sentence that flows one to the next. It's just like I did this and then I did this, I linked to this other thing. it just, at least for me, feels a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering if now is the right time to ask you about this because I think that you have may have changed things, but maybe we can talk about that in a sec. But you share it every week, is that right? And in what format for your 100K experiment?
We'll go with how I was
Yeah.
until yesterday. Right. So for my 100K experiment, when people sign up, I'm going to share a behind the scenes every week of what I'm doing or have done to create more passive income in my life and my business. And again, I've got a template. There are 5 things I share. Again, I've told you 4 of them. I've just forgotten the other one right now. And once a week, I'll just sit down, I will fill it out. Like, these were my thoughts and ideas of what I wanted to really achieve this week. This is what I've actually done. These are the results. Here's a breakdown of all the different passive income streams, like what's made the most, what's made the least, etc. And for ease, I send that out once a week via email. And I do so because I also have a course area, but I know people are not going to log in and like find their password and where's that link again. They're just not going to remember to log in every single week. So I send it via email and people love it because as they're out and about, as they're at home, stood in the queue for the supermarket, scrolling when they shouldn't be scrolling, like wherever they want to be, they can just access my behind the scenes, read it. It's a really easy format and like it's got a really high open rate and response rate. But also, so yeah, I do that for ease on an ongoing basis, but I also just copy paste that behind the scenes into a course area so that as I'm doing the experiment, like obviously I'm 7 months in now, people can still sign up to my experiment and they can get the back kind of catalog or library behind the scenes. They can read them, they're there. Once I complete this experiment, I then have a ready-made product to go. So again, I can still continue to sell it. So that's how I primarily do it. I send an email with all of that week. I add it to a course area. And then just as an extra little bonus, I also just do a private podcast where if anybody wants to ask any questions throughout the experiment, they're more than welcome. And I'll anonymously record a podcast episode that not only that person can listen to, but everybody else in the experiment as well.
That's super helpful. So there's 2 things I just want to ask a little bit more about that. Firstly, you said you get a really high response rate. So what kind of things is this? What kind of things are people responding when you're sending these emails?
I'll either get just sometimes it's just like normal things like really love this one, that's so interesting, thank you so much. Sometimes I'll get a question around something that's happened that week or just the experiment as a whole. And then sometimes I'll get from people like, oh, you shared this thing, I hadn't even thought about that, I'm going to try that. So it's really interesting to see from the replies what questions come up that interest people the most, or the things or ideas that people choose to implement or try for themselves. So those are typical things that I get.
So it's kind of like real-time feedback and potential
Yeah.
questions for you to then add in as extra content. Does anyone
Yes.
ever overstep the boundaries and go more into the like, well, how do I do this? And want like coaching on that?
Do you know what? I've not had that. No. I think the only thing I did have is because for me, it like quote unquote passive income, it can come from lots of different areas and sources. And one of the ways that I have created in my more life, I would say, than business is investing as well. Like, yes, I want my business to earn money. Thank you very much. But like earning quote unquote passive income in your business typically takes a lot more work to set up the course, to set up the membership, whatever, than investing. Like, you invest in a thing, and depending on what it is, you can almost forget about it and it will just do its thing in the background. So because I'm sharing like, oh, I also do this. Yes, I'm a business owner, but I'm also an investor as well. And like, this is one of my passive income streams. I had a lot of questions at the beginning regarding like, Ruth, talk to me about this. Like, I don't want to blanket statement this, but I would say especially even more for like women, and it's mostly women who have signed up right now, like investing just hasn't really been a thing. Like, it's not as normal as typical right now. I think maybe 1 or 2 people like have already invested, but like there was so many people just like, I've seen people do this, but I don't know, it's scary, talk to me. So nobody's overstepped the boundary, but I had a lot of questions there. So I decided to add in like another bonus where I just shared my investment strategy in terms of like I am not giving you advice, totally not qualified, but this is my investment strategy. This is what I do. This is what I have set up. You can take that, run with it, do nothing, do something, but like this is what I do. So yeah, it wasn't overstepping the boundary, but like it was an additional thing that I decided to add that people have found really, really useful.
Can I just say, I am in your 100K experiment and I have listened to that bonus. I think I probably listened to it on the podcast version. It's so good. It, I know you said like I'm not qualified, I'm not giving you advice, which is actually why it makes sense for you to put it in your behind the scenes thing versus selling it as a separate course. But it's just so great for people like me who need it in plain English and someone like
Mhm.
me doing it and explaining how you do it. I love that bonus. So yeah, I am going to put the
Yeah.
link to this course, the 100K experiment, in the show notes as well. So go check it out. Such a good bonus. Okay, and then the second thing I wanted to pull out. Yes, so you said you're 7 months in, you're still selling this experiment, which I think is very good point to pull up uh, on its own. Like it still sells 7 months in.
Hmm.
Brilliant. And you've got the emails that go out, because I do agree it's really great for it to be very accessible for
Yeah.
people. And that's certainly how like with a type of offer like this, I like to have it very accessible, easy to engage with. I love a private podcast. I love something in the email. I don't have to log in. But having the back catalogue in the course platform is great for people who prefer to batch it and read it all in one go, or
Yeah.
go back and they've signed up at a later date. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to also share my experience with this because when I started doing my revamped experiment, 200 members, I was thinking, oh, I'll sell it as a standalone thing at the start of it.
Hmm.
And I can see why people would sign up at the start, but I couldn't see why people would sign up as I was further into it because it's like the real
Yeah.
juiciness. But actually, now that I'm doing it, I I just think every week I feel like it's I record a podcast version of mine, but it's also text, and I do the same as you. I put it in the email. It's only 5 minutes or 5, 6, 7 minutes maximum. But every week I'm sharing something really valuable and interesting, and I can totally
Yeah.
see why it would make a standalone product even after it's over. So it's
Hmm.
really great to see it evolve and to know that this is not just something we can sell while we're doing it. So we're creating momentum, income, and what's the word? Motivation for us to do
Yeah.
it by selling it in the moment, but we're also then building something that adds
For long
to our,
term.
yeah, long term,
Long.
which I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So I guess I just wanted to pull that out and just really emphasize how amazing it is to do these things.
I think that's the thing. Like you can, like I said, like I love an experiment because I love an experiment, but I also love it because in this way, say like my 100K experiment, on day one, I had done none of it, but I just wrote an intro post of like, this is why I'm doing it. There was nothing else in my experiment because I hadn't started yet. But from day one, I started earning, and it's what allowed me to launch it really quickly within 3 or 4 days of the idea because I'm taking you behind the scenes as I go. So yeah, from day one you can get paid. Throughout the experiment, especially if it's a bit of a longer one, you can get paid. And once you wrap it up, you can continue getting paid. So yeah, I like it from all perspectives.
And I was just thinking, actually, I was thinking of a specific example of a program I'm in. It's actually Evelyn Rice's coaching membership method program. And I interviewed her on the podcast. So if anyone listening wants to go back in the archives, that was such a good interview. She has, at the time, was serving over 8,000 members. It's probably way higher than that now. And in her course, she added, and this was a while ago, she added a case study of her from zero because it's so
Hmm.
easy to look at someone with 8,000 members and think, you are so far removed from me.
Yeah.
I will never get there. It's okay for you, whatever. And she did a case study and shared her journey and how tough it was at the start. And it immediately opens up, okay, this is possible for me. Like she was
Yeah.
like me, so I can do it. So I can see why, even in the future, when you've moved on from your
Hmm.
experiment, even having it in your products and people of a certain whatever level they're at can still benefit from it because they're
Yeah.
not so far removed from that, even if they feel further removed from where you are now.
Yeah. 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 completely.
Yeah, amazing. I haven't actually thought of it that way until we talked about it just now, so that's great. All right, so there's one more thing I really want to talk about, which is really important when it comes to this kind of thing, especially when you have committed to a year-long experiment. What happens if and when life happens? What happens if you need to take a break, you want to take a break, you're feeling fed up with your experiment, all the things?
Well, what a timely question, Ruth. So, as we're recording this, yesterday I sent out an email, did a post in my client student group because I have pivoted and adjusted my own experiment partway through. So again, I had the idea, I launched it within 3 or 4 days, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a weekly behind the scenes, and I want to hopefully achieve my 100K goal within 12 months. I'm like, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's doable. Well, let's go. Um, and again, I shared it for the first 6 months, and I was definitely taking lessons along the way in terms of, oh, these bits feel really good and fun, they're working. Oh, actually, these other bits feel harder as I'm setting up all these passive income things. Um, and so one of the big lessons that I learned was, oh, because my experiment focuses on like money, income, passive income specifically, most or all of my decisions were being guided, number one, by, is this thing that I'm doing today going to earn me money? And that's all good. Like, I want more income and passive income in my business. So there's a reason I'm doing the experiment. But I realized along the way, with every decision that I was making, purely or mostly being focused on how much money is this going to make me, that my creativity was just being zapped and squashed. And like, I'm a highly creative person. I come from a design background. I've got a ton of creative ideas. They typically come at all different price points. You know, sometimes it might be a higher price thing that I have an idea for. Sometimes it's a lower price thing. Sometimes it's a free thing that just feels fun. And I want to be able to share all of these things. And I just realized, oh, but I really want to write a book. I really want to do this other thing. And I really want to do this other thing, but I can't do those yet because it doesn't align with my 100K goal and reaching it within 12 months. So I was really noticing that my creativity was being suppressed. And I'm like, I don't like this. And first of all, I was just like, well, let's just trudge through. There's only another 6 months to go. That was one thought. And then the second was just a big life thing did happen last month for me. And it just completely drained me emotionally, mentally, all of the ways it can drain a person. And I just didn't have like the oomph. And I just realized like I could carry on, but I would really be sacrificing my own health if I did. So I did an announcement and I just said, you know what, I'm going to put my 100K experiment on pause for 1 month. I am going to take a mini sabbatical / self-care month. Ruth is going to look after Ruth. And, you know, I'm going to pick up again this 100K experiment once I'm back. You know, it's going to be 12 months, but just there's going to be a pause in the middle. And I'm just literally back now from that self-care month. And I realized, I'm like, no, do you know what? There are some things that, because it's an experiment, you haven't done the thing, it's not tried and tested. There are some things that just feel a bit clunky, a bit unfun, that I'm just not enjoying. And do I want to not enjoy the next 6 months? No, like that's the opposite of my business values. So there's a couple of adjustments and tweaks that I want to make. And one of them was like, there's no feedback I've had, no question I've had from any member that's put any pressure on me, like, Ruth, you must achieve this within 12 months. Like, that's not the purpose. It's an experiment. I've not promised I'm going to reach 100K. I could reach 80K. I could reach 120K. Who knows? So nobody's put pressure on me, but just how my mind works, I'm like, I want to reach that goal. Like, that is me. And so, because again, all of my decisions have been solely focused more on income rather than my creativity being allowed to flourish and then getting paid for that creativity, I needed to make an adjustment. So I decided one of the things that I'm changing is that I'm removing the 12-month time frame. It's going to take what it's going to take. And I could leave that 12 months in place and it just ends up, I'll do my best. And if I don't hit it, I've completed the experiment because it's 12 months and I've ended up reaching whatever, 86,000. But in my head, like, the loop isn't closed and I really want to achieve my goal. So if it ends up taking whatever, 14 months or 15 months rather than the 12, I would rather keep going at my own pace having fun with it and like complete it and share that. So yeah, for me, I've just removed that time frame. I let people know yesterday. And the other thing that I did was something I did have feedback around was people love the weekly behind the scenes. However, I had a couple of questions from people saying, by any chance, have you got a bit more of like a monthly roundup? So all the kind of granular detail that you're sharing in the weekly behind the scenes, is there kind of like a bit of a recap where you can just see it all together and it just makes a bit more sense? So I started doing then an additional monthly recap, which was a bit more work to add on to the weekly. And as I come back, I'm like, would that be a better format where I can encompass it all? I can add all the podcast episodes in one place. I can put graphs and charts for everything. So I'm still sharing the faux behind the scenes, but just in a bit of a more of a well-structured way that just makes sense a little bit more. So I did a poll, I put it out. I think one person said, I'd still like the weekly ones. There was a good handful that said like, yes, please just put it in a nice monthly recap, package it up. That makes way more sense to me. And then the most amount of people were just like, Ruth, I don't even care how you share your behind the scenes. I just want them. So I'm like, okay, so now I've changed it from weekly to monthly that I share it. And so one, I think it's just going to be a better format for those taking part and reading it. And then obviously for me, there's just a little bit less work because instead of every single week taking a couple of hours to write the behind the scenes, it's a once a month thing. So I've got a bit more time to actually work on my experiments and earn some of that income rather than writing about the experiment. So those are the two changes I've made, and we've pivoted a little bit.
I love that. I mean, I, for one, love those monthly updates. I also love that you shared most people were like, I don't care. I just want the
Yeah,
experiment.
they literally were like, don't
Yeah.
care.
And I think often our worry is that people will care and people will be annoyed. And I guess my worry would also be, oh, I'm changing what it is that they bought. But I think that's the thing about selling an experiment. You are selling an experiment, and the experiment will shift as you experiment
Yeah.
with things.
And I think like with the changing it from weekly to monthly, I specifically put the poll out, and in my head, I had it where if most people said, love it weekly, that is really how I want it, I completely would have kept the weekly. Like it wasn't that attached to that outcome. It's just I specifically had feedback around maybe a monthly one instead would be better. Um, but yeah, just it's gonna revolve along the way. And I'm the same as you. I'm like, oh, people have paid. I don't want to like bait and switch. Like I'm promising you one thing, but haha, I'm changing it halfway through. So it depends what it is. Like the time frame to me, I just knew nobody's really going to care about if it takes 2 more months or 3 more months. Like, you know, people just
Yeah.
love people probably be happy, just like I get 3 months more behind
Yeah,
the scenes. Okay.
exactly.
Whereas like the change from weekly to monthly, it did feel like sort of I'm taking something away, and hence I'm polling just to make sure like are you still happy, and that just felt the most like right and fair thing to do.
I also think the other thing that's important, because we had quite a big conversation about this in one of the summit bonus sessions, is just knowing that not only are you human, but everyone following along is human as well. And
Mm-hmm.
it's quite permission giving for people to see you changing things up, really being motivated to work towards a goal, but then knowing when to, step back a bit for your own mental
Have a little
health.
adjustment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did this too with the first iteration of my experiment. I mean, it did actually fizzle out completely, but that's because I didn't have the parameters around it. And when I came back, I was honest with people and I said, yeah, mental health stuff, I couldn't keep
Mm-hmm.
it going, and I'm not gonna, right now, it's not the priority for me to continue this. And then I did eventually come back with a much upgraded experiment, thanks to everything you've shared. And then in the session we did in the summit, one of my members happened to be there in the chat, and she said, oh, that was so permission giving for me to see. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
actually know that. She hadn't replied to me or anything at the time. But hearing that was just the best reminder. Like, I'm walking the talk in terms of how I actually run the experiment, not just what goes into the experiment. Really important as well.
Yeah, I found the same. And like I still have wobbles now of if I change things a little bit, or I don't know, what will people think? Like just childhood conditioning. Thank you very much. But when I did the post a month ago where I'm like, I'm taking a month off, like I need it, and this is just happens to be why. Like so much love come from that post of
Yeah.
like, go, Ruth, like you like. And again, it's just they love me seeing my they love seeing me take care of myself. But again, it's permission given, like, oh, do you know what? It's okay if I ever need to take a week, a month, or whatever off. It's okay for me to take care of me too. And likewise with me sharing the update where I'm making a couple of adjustments to the 100K experiment, like a paid thing. Likewise, the amount of emails I got in reply to that update or comments on that thread were just like, yep, go you, love. And again, the word people were using was, this is so permission given for me in my own business for different things that I maybe want to change or pivot or tweak along the way. So yeah, like it's nerve-wracking sometimes, but it's so permission given to other people. So
And I always think if the worst comes to worst, like let's say you didn't just want to extend the timeline, but you actually wanted to let go of the goal. Like you just decided it wasn't for you. You can either say, I've done 7 months. I've decided to end the experiment and share a wrap up and invite people to get in touch if, they feel shortchanged. Or you could literally refund people if you really wanted to. I always think, worst comes to worst, if I have to do that, it's not really the end of the world, but probably you
yeah.
won't have to. But it's good to know you have options.
And I think that's the thing, like I said, like one of the I've got a few big lessons so far, halfish way in. But again, one of the big things was, I really want to create more passive income. Like there's things I want to do, I want to have more freedom, like I want to move home, we're going to relocate, etc. So there's a reason I'm doing this. And there's a reason I set the goal. But again, one of the biggest things I've learned is the money and the income cannot come at the cost of my creativity. Like it just cannot. So even if you don't achieve your goal and you do want to stop or pause or quit partway through, there are typically going to be some really big lessons of why you're doing that you can still share. And they're just as valuable to share with people as actually just hitting or achieving the goal as well. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, is there anything else you want people to know when it comes to creating and selling their business experiments?
Yes. So one of the things I see sometimes is somebody wants to create a digital product or they want to create a course. And especially if they're a little bit newer, they're just a little bit nervous in terms of, am I good enough? Is it good enough? Am I expert enough? And the thing that I love with a business experiment is that's kind of one of your selling points. You're not ever needing to say, I'm an expert in building or growing a membership. I'm an expert in pitching to podcasts. I'm an expert in growing my email list. You're literally pitching it as, I haven't done this before. This is a total experiment. It could totally flop. I could do amazingly. I could do somewhere in the middle. But I'm just going to share with you. You can follow along that journey if you want. So it's a really, again, permission giving thing where you don't need to try and be amazing and perfect and have this great course that's going to teach somebody X, Y, Z. You're just literally saying, do you want to come behind the scenes? Like, I'm trying this out for the first time. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you can launch like it's not a course or digital products, it's a kind of, but not like it's an experiment, but like you just don't have to be an expert in the thing to go and have fun with this new business goal that you have and share it in that way.
Oh, I'm so glad that you shared that. Such an important reminder. So, I'm going to put the link to your course about selling your business experiments, which will set people up with everything they need to put it out there. And like you said, this is something that is really quick to run with once you have the idea, which is the beauty of it. So, yeah, I'm excited to hear. Please get in touch with either of us and let us know if you have been
Yeah.
inspired, because I'm sure that people will have. Okay, so I have three quick fire questions to wrap up the episode. The first one is, beyond financial success, what impact do you want to have in the world through your work?
I'm going to be really controversial and say I don't really want to make an impact at all. And the reason for it is a lot of people say, like, oh, I want to just use your example. I want to have 1,000 people in my membership. All good. But to me, I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. Or I want to impact 1 million people. Again, that just completely overwhelms my brain. The idea of just like helping, impacting 1 million people, like what? Or changing the world in some way. Just my insides, they just get overwhelmed. They shut down. What's going on? So instead, for me, I see it that I just love making, creating, and sharing fun new ideas. Like I just love letting my creativity go wild. And it could be I do a business experiment. I might create this fun template. I might create this journal one day, whatever it is, like whatever creative thing that I've got in my heart and my mind, I just want to scatter it and share it with the world, make it the best it can be, and for people to enjoy my creative ideas. And through doing that, I just want to inspire people to do the same thing. And I don't need to inspire 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 1,000,000 people. But if I can just help or inspire one person each day, then that is all I need. And that is all the fulfillment I need. So if I share my journal and somebody else is wanting to do theirs and they're like, oh, Ruth did hers and look at how cool it was or how well received it was, like maybe I'll actually launch my journal now, and they actually go and do the thing, that's all the reward I need. So that's how I see it a little bit differently, and it stops me getting overwhelmed.
I love that. Thank you. Question number 2, if you could give a message of inspiration and encouragement to past you earlier on in your business, what would it be?
Just go and follow all of your wild, crazy, doesn't make sense, rule-breaking ideas. Again, even if they do not make sense on paper, because they are typically going to be what leads you to all of the best places in your business.
Mm. And finally, what does soulful selling mean to you?
Again, I don't see selling as selling. I don't know if it's like because I need to trick my brain or whatever, but if you said, go and write a sales email, I'm like, oh, I don't want to sell to people. So for me, I'm just like, oh, how can I be helpful in this email? How can I be helpful in this course? How can I be helpful in this Facebook post? So rather than try and sell a thing, it's more like, oh, I've got this resource. If it's useful, here's where you'll find it. So I'll happily share my links. I will happily tell people about things that I've got, but it's more in that way. Like, for example, I've got something called the Journal Template Kit, and it gives somebody everything they need to create and sell their own journals on Amazon in the template. So I know people want to, create their own journals. So I've got no issue just saying like, oh, if you want to create your own journal, I've got this toolkit over here. It gives you the template you need and everything you need to get set up on Amazon. Here's the link. So I'm not, in my eyes, selling. I'm just going around, doing my thing, being helpful. So yeah, I position it a little bit differently. Soulful helping, maybe.
Perfect. Thank you. Speaking of links, I will record a little outro that will play just after this with all of the links to all the things we've talked about. And yeah, just thanks so much, Ruth. This is going to be, it was so helpful for me in the summit, and I've run with what you've shared, and I'm sure so many people are going to run with it too, but definitely go and check out the course because that's going to make it so much easier. And if you want to find out more about Ruth Ridgeway and her work, you can find her on Instagram at HeyRuthXO. You can visit her website at ruthxo.com and sign up to her emails all about creating a life and business filled with freedom, fun, and passive income at ruthxo.com/free. And don't forget to also check out the 2 courses we mentioned in this interview. There is the Sell Your Business Experiments course at ruthpoundwhite.com/L/biz experiments, and her own 100K experiment at ruthpoundwhite.com/L/100K. These links are affiliate links. I am a proud affiliate. And of course, these links will also be found in the show notes if you need them there. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Soulful Sales. If you have a moment to rate and review, know that it really does make a difference. And if you'd like to carry on the conversation, then you can connect with me on Instagram at Ruth Poundwhite, sign up to my newsletter at ruthpoundwhite.com/newsletter, or my personal favorite, join me inside the low ticket membership at ruthpoundwhite.com/membership. And keep doing what you're doing because your work really does matter.